Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in today. This is the Bodega Cat Book Club Financial Edition, and today we're continuing our reading of Gold Warriors by Sterling and Peggy Seagrave. And the subtitle is called America's Secret Recovery of Yamashita's Gold. So this book was inspired by current events, I guess you can say, especially regarding precious metals. And I thought it would just be very interesting to learn about its history, or one of the precious metals. Um, anyways, uh, learn about its history and some of the hidden stories that we don't really hear about, which is very interesting, I think. But before we begin, I want to thank you all for being here today. And if you like what we do, please do consider our other book clubs. We have our spiritual book clubs on Mondays, and then health book clubs on Wednesdays, where we read books related to, spirituality and health, respectively. So we put all our books that we've read, as well as the current ones, on YouTube. So please do check it out and like and subscribe and comment and all that good stuff. We put all the books on a playlist, and so you can just download it and listen to it when you're in traffic or when you're walking your dog or whatever you might be doing. And we have other contents on our YouTube as well, not just book clubs. So we have Akashic Records readings as well as podcasts and other things that we're working on. If you have a book that you want to recommend for us to read, I will leave a link in the description box below. It could be a spiritual book, it could be a health book, it could be a financial book. We love to hear from you. We love to hear what's in your library, and we love to read. So, reading is a lost art, in my opinion, and I would love to bring it back because it really makes you smarter. You look at wealthy people, great leaders, uh, people like that. They read, they're avid readers. So, anyways, also check out our free monthly newsletter. Please do sign up for that as well. And if you want to support me further, you can buy me a coffee, leave a donation, check out our merch under in our shop section on our website. We have many different designs for your fur babies, for your doggies and kitties, as well as for humans. Everyday wear, everyday use, um, things of that nature. And we're always, uh, updating our design, improving our design, or coming up with new designs. So, anyways, check it out. Come back often and support us that way. And if you are in the Los Angeles area or in the LA area visiting us, come visit us in the Healing Center. We have a healing center that we use technologies based on Nikola Tesla's scalar wave research for holistic healing for both domestic cats and dogs as well as humans. So you can read all about that technology on our website, learn more about it, as well as our other services that we provide. So um, we appreciate you supporting us in whatever way, shape, or form that you can. But most importantly, thank you for being here. Thank you for being on this journey with us. And thank you for loving to read like we do. It's just amazing. Okay, so this is chapter 3, and this will be part 1. Now, this book has a lot of endnotes in the back of the chapters. So I will read about a page or so, and then I'll read the endnotes in the back because sometimes they have um, explanations, in paragraph form. The author does. They might have explanations and stuff in paragraph form that I kind of like to read. So that's kind of what I'll do. I'll read about a chapter and then I'll read the endnote. Sorry, I'll read about a page or so and then I'll read the endnotes. Okay. Now, I hope you're enjoying this book so far. It reads like a Hollywood movie. I wonder if someone will pick it up and make it into a movie. I think that would be very interesting, don't you think? Okay, so let's see here. I think this is a good, okay, I think that's good. All right, so here we go. This is chapter three, again, part one, the rape of China. In the rest of China, Japan's violent seizure of Manchuria provoked rage and apprehension. Many believed that Japanese would continue to bite off parts of China in the years ahead until they swallowed the entire country. A Mantetsu researcher said, quote, "We need to think more about why it was that our good intentions did not communicate to the Chinese masses." End quote. That is a funny quote. Not funny, haha, but funny, sad. Well, maybe because you're killing off the Chinese. Sorry. That quote just kind of struck me there for a minute. Okay, continuing. In Shanghai, portraits of Hirohito were paraded with paper daggers piercing his heart. Chinese newspapers reported a failed attempt by a Korean portrait to assassinate Hirohito, the bullet hitting another carriage. 10 days later, on January 18, 1932, five young Japanese dressed as Buddhist monks paraded down a crowded Shanghai street, singing songs celebrating Japan's victories. Outraged, Chinese lynched one of them on the spot. The monks were expendable agents sent by secret services, Major Tanaka Ryuichi. The provocation was staged to give Japan an excuse to intervene to protect its citizens. The Imperial Navy had ships stationed in Shanghai's Huangpu River to guard its commercial interests. Japanese Marines poured ashore. Hundreds of Yakuza and Black Dragon thugs joined the fray, armed with Mauser pistols, rifles, swords, and baseball bats. The fight was joined by the Chinese 19th Route Army Camp. Um, Sorry, let's try that again. The fight. Okay, I'm having cotton mouth today. Sorry about that. The fight was joined by the Chinese 19th Route Army camped outside the city. With Hirohito's approval, 90,000 additional Japanese troops were rushed in. Parts of the city were flattened by field artillery and naval guns, while Japanese aircraft strafed, I don't know that word, and bombed the crowded streets. Some 18,000 civilians were killed and 240,000 Chinese lost their homes. Amazed Westerners watched from the relative safety of rooftops in the international settlement and French concession. During Japan's takeover of Korea and Manchuria, only a handful of Western observers were present, mostly diplomats. In Shanghai, thousands of foreigners were eyewitnesses to Japan's overkill. Among journalists caught in the crossfire, Ernest Hauser reported that, quote, dogs and rats were celebrating a holiday of their own. There were places where one could no longer distinguish the corpses beneath the ravenous packs, end quote. In London, Japan's ambassador Yoshida Shigeru said the assault on Shanghai had been a grave miscalculation. Thomas Lamont of the House of Morgan lamented that Tokyo's action would make it, quote, impossible to arrange any further credit for Japan, either through investment or banking circles, end quote. On March 2nd, after 34 hours of fighting, the 19th Route Army began a general retreat. Next day, Japan declared a unilateral truce, followed by an official armistice. The Japanese army would return 5 years later, in the summer of 1937, to finish the job. Wow. Okay, let's read some of the endnotes there. What page is that? 32, 33. Okay. All right, so here's some endnotes. The part about biting off parts. As far as many Chinese were concerned, quote, Japan seemed bound and determined to colonize China. end quote. You can find that in Wakeman, Policing, page 187. The note about Shanghai in the early 1930s, you can find that in Seagrave, The Song Dynasty, Sergeant Shanghai, chapter 5, Wakeman, Policing, page 187. The note about 90,000 troops in Shanghai, Hirohito's approval. You can find that in Wakeman, Policing, page 187 to 192, 194. Sergeant Shanghai, page 184 to 189. Tales of Old Shanghai online contains many contemporary quotations from observers. Okay, so I guess the next one I can read page 33 and 34. All right. All right, excuse me. Allergies acting up here. Okay, at the time, the image of China was as the sick man of Asia, a country of unparalleled corruption and vice on the verge of collapse. Many Westerners thought China was so decadent it had been bled of its wealth long ago. Nothing could be further from the truth. The wealth that changed hands from one warlord to another did not evaporate and was minor compared to what remained deeply hidden. The repeated plunder of Peking took away quantities of imperial treasure, to be sure, but did not disturb bullion, artworks, and patrimony belonging to the aristocracy, to merchant families, or to racketeers and gangsters. Because they had good reason not to trust anyone outside the family or clan, Chinese did not put their liquid assets in banks. They kept quantities of gems and small gold bars called biscuits ingeniously hidden. For 3,000 years, the Chinese had been a society of antiquarians, art critics, and collectors. They acquired ancient bronzes, porcelains, jades, books, scrolls, paintings, and other fine decorative arts. Shang bronzes in particular were coveted. These collections were cataloged, and the catalogs themselves became precious records shared by collectors and purveyors of antiquities. Copies of these catalogs were purchased by Japanese collectors. There was no great mystery about who in China owned what. At the beginning of the 20th century, China's imperial collections alone included over 100,000 pieces of priceless jade, varying in size from several inches to several feet, carved by artists over many centuries, plus over 1.2 million books and manuscripts, and porcelains in the millions. For the Japanese, the only challenge was how to find the gold, platinum, jade, and gems laid down in private hoards, because wealthy Chinese were obsessively secret. In Lords of the Rim, we trace China's revolving merchant class from ancient times to present global networks of super rich overseas Chinese who are thought to control over $3 trillion in assets worldwide. Because emperors always had a monopoly on trade disguised as tribute, all other commerce was illegal in China, punishable by death. Merchants were targets of repression and were imprisoned or exiled with their families to barbarian lands beyond the frontiers. So in China, all business traditionally was done covertly as an illicit underworld, bribing magistrates to look the other way. By necessity, the bulk of China's wealth remained out of sight, carefully hidden. Only toward the end of the 19th century did the crumbling Manchu regime permit merchants to come above ground, partly as a grudging concession to Western influence, but mostly for tax revenues. Western banks in the treaty ports were off limits to Chinese, but native banking networks existed to serve particular merchant clans, and pawn shops provided loans to farmers. A parallel situation existed in Japan, historically, because rulers and samurai alike regarded merchants as vermin. So the Japanese understood that China's treasure would not be laying around waiting to be confiscated. Seizing this hidden wealth became a glorious obsession for Japan's financiers. The Zaibatsu vigorously backed army conquest, hoping to gain control of China's well-developed mineral resources, industrial base, and immense consumer market. But the heads of these corporations had their own personal collections to enlarge. When we think of looting in the West, we think of banks, museums, palaces, cathedrals, and mansions, and overlook black money sources. In China, all money was black. It could not be stolen without the use of extortion and terror. Japan's rogue samurai had gained practical experience in extortion and terror in Korea and Manchuria. They left to the Kapitai obvious targets like banks, museums, and mansions, and turned their attention to finding personal fortunes and great pools of wealth from drugs, alcohol, prostitution, gambling, smuggling, and other rackets. To make it easy, they reached temporary partnerships with Chinese racketeers, hard men who felt no remorse about victimizing their own countrymen. It was this unholy alliance of rogues and racketeers that caused China in the 1930s and 1940s to hemorrhage treasure like never before. Haphazard collaboration between the Japanese underworld and the Chinese underworld had been going on for centuries. For example, Chinese trading um, networks based on coastal Fujian province had ocean-going junks voyaging as far west as Africa and Arabia. Each syndicate had its own private navy and marines, with treasuries of gold biscuits stashed in strongholds along the coast and offshore in island strongholds. Since their common enemy was China's imperial government, the natural allies of these pirate syndicates were the Japanese. Traders from Fujian often sought refuge in Japan's Goto Islands and the southwest coast of Kyushu, where they were protected by the domain lord. His samurai often joined the pirates to pillage the south bank of the Yangtze, where there were many wealthy estates. So, in the 20th century, it was natural for Japanese and Chinese gangsters to renew this profitable random collaboration. If there was a single genius behind the Underworld Alliance, it was General Dohara, the mastermind of the Manchurian drug trade, whose personal circle included Japan's top gangsters. He was also on first name terms with the leaders of Japan's Green Gang, based in Shanghai. Above ground, Shanghai was administered by three governments. Biggest was the Chinese municipality, run by the KMT regime of Generalissimo Chiang Kai-shek. Next were two prosperous foreign enclaves, concessions squeezed from the Manchu throne in the 19th century. The smaller was the French concession with a population of around 500,000. To say it was French is an exaggeration, as there were only about 2,400 French civilians and 300 French uh, what? Gendarmes? Gendarmes? Is that how I say it? Sorry, I butchered that word. Gendarmes? Uh, sounds like some kind of an army or something. Okay, the rest were 14,000 Europeans of various nationalities, including white Russians and Chinese who preferred French rule to Chinese tyranny. The French concession was home to China's most powerful grandfather, Tu Sheng, boss of the Green Gang. He enjoyed French protection in return for generous contributions from rackets in drugs, brothels, and gambling. Okay, let's read some of the endnotes there. Let's do page 33. Okay. Okay. All right. So, the note about the fact that Chinese were themselves great collectors of antiquities was observed by many Western visitors. See, for instance, Juliet Braden in Peking, chapter, I think that's 19, if I remember my Roman numeral. Anyways, and Mrs. Archibald Little, Intimate China, page 295. So the note about Tu Yisheng, though to though Kodama and General Dohara offered Boss Tu a chance to work full-time for Japan, Tu was no fool. He maintained tight connections with Generalissimo Chang and the KMT secret police boss, General Tai Li. As the fighting moved beyond Peking, Tu fled to Hong Kong and made his roundabout way to Chongqing, where he set out the war. That's in Seagrave Song. The note about prosperous foreign enclaves, you can find that in Wakeman Policing, page 9. The note about Britain's $1 billion investment in China, you can find that in Westerstein Secret War, page 6. Did we read that? I don't remember reading that. Oh, that was later. Okay. So we haven't read it yet, but I'll go ahead and read the end notes so we don't have to come back. Okay. And then the note about Japanese in Shanghai were the largest single foreign community by the end of World War One. You can find that in Wasserstein Secret War in Shanghai, page 6. Okay. So those are the foot end notes that we're going to be reading right now. All right. Beyond the French concession was the international settlement, dominated by Britain and, to a lesser extent, America. Its foreign population was less than 40,000. In China as a whole, Britain's influence was preeminent, and her government and citizens had nearly $1 billion invested there, most of it in Shanghai. By the 1920s, however, the largest single foreign community in Shanghai was Japanese. Mostly businessmen, bankers, hoteliers, gangsters, and secret agents. Hostile toward Westerners and Chinese, the Japanese inhabited a district called Little Tokyo in the suburb of Hankou. Many of them were advance agents of invasion. Japan had been preparing feverishly in using industrial cover. All over East and Southeast Asia, military projects were underway, including airfields, port facilities, and coastal surveys. Right in the heart of Shanghai's riverfront, Japanese companies bought three large wharves and dug a tunnel from those warehouses to a reinforced concrete Japanese army headquarters and arsenal in Jiangwan Road. Little was done in Shanghai without the knowledge of Boss Tu, who took a bite of every pastry. Businessmen who refused to pay off Tu risked being kidnapped or shot, or having their houses bombed. Once Tu abducted Mei Ling Song, bride of Chiang Kai-shek, to remind the Generalissimo who really was in charge. By 1932, 44-year-old Boss Tu already had great fortune. He was a self-made man with a vengeance, born in desperate poverty across the river in Putong and in a squalid slum called Kaohsiung. His father, a coolie in a grain shop. Just a side note, if a coolie is one of those hardworking people who you see this in Chinese movies. Those people in the ports, they carry like bags of rice or bags of something. You know, they're just labor people. That's what coolies are. They call them that in Hong Kong. So just a little detour there. Okay. Continue. In his teens, Tu became a runner for the drug lord of the French concession, a chief detective known as Pockmarked Huang. At the time, there were three gangs, red, green, and blue, competing for control of the drug trade. Tu showed Pockmarked Huang how they could work together as a cartel. Eventually, the red and blue gangs withered, leaving Tu's green gang in charge of all rackets far up the Yangtze River into China's interior. By the 1930s, gambling was on a greater scale in Shanghai than anywhere else on earth, with proceeds of more than $1 million a week. Two's three-story Fusheng casino on Avenue Folk provided customers with chauffeured limousines. There was dog racing at Two's conodrome. Over 100,000 prostitutes worked in brothels, cabarets, and dance halls like Farron's and Del Monte's, where white Russian women danced and more with paying clients. Once they understood each other, Two became one of Chiang Kai shek's chief backers. He shared drug profits directly with the Generalissimo. Boy, that's a tongue twister. Generalissimo, and in return was licensed by the KMT government. This allowed Chiang to pretend that he was pursuing an aggressive campaign of opium suppression, but only Two's rivals were suppressed. The Opium Suppression Bureau turned over confiscated opium to the Green Gang for conversion to heroin and morphine. The Generalissimo received his cut through the Farmers Bank of China, owned by Two and referred to sarcastically as the Opium Farmers Bank. Chiang used his cut to upgrade his army, which annoyed Tokyo. During the initial Japanese assault on Shanghai in 1932, Boss Two sent Green Gang toughs to fight the invaders. Chiang praised him for his gallant display of patriotism, but it was only turf warfare. Two was not prepared to let the Japanese undermine his control of gambling, prostitution, and narcotics. General Dohara worked out a compromise by which the Green Gang, the KMT regime, and the Japanese secretly divided the spoils, much as the red, blue, and green gangs had done earlier. The deal was implemented by the Koo brothers, one of whom was the Green Gang's boss of the Shanghai waterfront, while the other was a KMT general. Okay, let's see what kind of endnote there is. It's quite a bit of endnotes here. Okay, so the note about Japan's secret tunnel connecting commercial wharfs to the Japanese military headquarters. You can find that in Wakeman Policing, page 188. The note about Green Gang dominated illegal activities in Shanghai, Wakeman Policing, page 25, and Seagrave Song. The note about Tu Ying Sheng's abduction of Mei Ling Song, you can find it in Seagrave Song, page 269 to 270. Two's early life and the triumph of the Green Gang over the Red and Blue Gangs. You can find that in Seagrave Song, page 150 to 152. The note about gambling, the Canidrome, that's the dog races. You could find that in Wakeman Policing, page 97 to 98, page 103. The note about 100,000 prostitutes, you can find that in Wakeman Policing, page 115. The note about Farron's and Del Monte's, you can find that in Wakeman Policing, page 107. Note about Tu Yangsheng's drug business moving into the Chinese area of Shanghai. His temporary loss of his private dope business and his reinvention as a government-approved drug dealer. Two's morphine and heroin factory supplied with KMT government. You can find that in Wakeman Policing, page 203 to 205 and page 263. The note about Japanese narcotics trafficking. You can find that in Anslinger, The Traffic in Narcotics, page 9 online. Japan's dope centers in Tenzin and Hankow, United Nations Information Office, Japan's Record and World Security, page 35 to 36, International Red Cross and the League of Nations studies in the 1930s show that the entire legitimate medical practice in China and Manchuria required only 15 kilos of heroin per year. Under Japan's rule, Korea produced over 2,600 kilos of heroin a year. See Bulletin on Narcotics. 1953, issue 2, online at the United Nations website. China Affairs Board. Prince Kano and the other officials associated with the China Affairs Board. See Korean Opium for Japan's Wars at www.kimsoft.com. For other details on the China Affairs Bureau and drugs, see Marshall, page 40. Wow, very interesting. Okay, let's see. Continuing. Okay, this enabled the Kempeitai to open its first Shanghai brothel in 1932. While Japanese investors started cotton mills, ironworks, railways, paper mills, power plants, and banks. Where once British shipping dominated, Japanese steamships linked Yangtze River ports deep into the interior, ready to be converted into troop carriers. In violation of the deal, Japan began to subvert the KMT opium monopoly by bringing in larger and larger quantities of drugs. What better way to demoralize China than by flooding it with cheap drugs from Manchuria, including heroin tablets and cigarettes laced with heroin? Boy, not just a side note, not much has changed, isn't it? I hear stories about the drug today is fentanyl, and I've heard people lacing it in drinks and cigarettes and drugs and stuff and tablets, like medical tablets and things like that. Very interesting, eh? All right, continuing. This caused dismay and consternation in KMT and Green Gang circles. The Japanese were growing opium on an unprecedented scale in Manchuria, supplementing it with opium imported by ship from Iran. The paste was converted into morphine and heroin at factories in Manchuria, Korea, and Taiwan, then smuggled directly across the strait on motorized junks to mainland warehouses owned by Mitsui, Mitsubishi, and other conglomerates. Interesting how Iran came up. I wonder if that strait that they're talking about is the Strait of Hormuz. There's been a lot of that in the news lately, current geopolitical news. Anyways, for 20, this is 2026 as I'm reading this. Um, okay, anyways, sorry about that. Continuing, an army factory in Seoul that produced over 2,600 kilos of heroin in 1938 to 39 was only one of several hundred factories in Manchuria, Korea, Taiwan, and in Japanese concessions in mainland cities like Hankow. At its peak, more than 1,000 Japanese firms were manufacturing and selling drugs, including cocaine and amphetamines. Boy, this drug thing is really big. It's a worldwide enterprise, isn't it? Japan so undercut Green Gang's prices that at one point the Generalissimo ordered his men to buy narcotics from the Japanese and sell them at a markup in areas controlled exclusively by the KMT. By the end of 1936, the Manchurian experiment had failed, and Tokyo was ready to seize the whole of China. The first step was to stage an incident outside Peking as an excuse to overrun the northern capital. On July 8, 1937, a Guangdong Army regimental commander at Fengtai near the Marco Polo Bridge ordered his men to fire on a Chinese barracks in retaliation for an imaginary insult. Emperor Hirohito was reluctant to commit too many troops to China when there was growing Soviet pressure along the Siberian frontier. But advisors assured him that, quote, war with China could be finished within 2 or 3 months, end quote. China also miscalculated. The Generalissimo's brother-in-law, Finance Minister T.V. Song, scoffed, quote, "Within 3 months, Japan will be on the verge of bankruptcy and facing revolution," end quote. Both predictions were widely off. The Marco Polo Bridge incident escalated into a China war that bogged down nearly 1 million Japanese troops for 8 years. And then it was China that faced bankruptcy and revolution. As all northeast China came under Japan's control, President Franklin Roosevelt threatened trade embargoes to stop the epidemic of of Japanese aggression. To preserve his own KMT army, which was his only means of staying in power, Generalissimo Chiang abandoned all of North China and crossed to the south bank of the Yangtze River. This shifted the focus of confrontation, exposing Shanghai and the other southern cities to attack. Exposing Shanghai and other, big southern cities to attack. On August 7, 1937, Chiang decided to stage a preemptive strike on the Japanese at Shanghai, hoping to draw America and Britain into the conflict to protect their own investments. 3 KMT divisions attacked the small Japanese garrison of 5,000 men in Hankou. Both sides quickly threw in additional forces, but indecision and wrong moves by Chiang Kai-shek squandered his numeric advantage as the Japanese countered with superior tactics, training, and equipment. There was incredible bungling. On August 14th, Japanese Air Force planes intending to sink the Japanese flagship Izumo in the Wangpu River dropped their bombs prematurely into crowded city streets with gruesome consequences. In 1 month of fighting, nearly 250,000 Chinese were killed, many of them women and children. During the confusion, to Tokyo's dismay, all Chinese banks, industries, and financiers loaded their wealth onto convoys of trucks and hurried into the French concession or the international settlement where they were protected by the warships of the Western powers. The Chinese army fought bravely until early November, when Chiang suddenly and inexplicably moved his armies and headquarters 180 miles west along the Yangtze to Nanking. Pursuing the Generalissimo westward, the Imperial Army ravaged the beautiful city of Suzhou, giving a foretaste of what was to come. As the Japanese began to circle Nanking, the Generalissimo decided once more to abandon his civilian population without a fight. First, he withdrew upriver to Wuhan, then 500 miles farther up the Yangtze to Chongqing in the mountains of Sichuan province, safe from all but the most determined conqueror. There, he set up his wartime government and told the world he still ruled China. Chiang took with him hundreds of big wood crates filled with art treasures. Anticipating the worst, he had ordered his secret police chief, General Tai Lai, to crate up the contents of the national museums in Peking and as many art treasures as could be assembled from other museums. Ultimately, these crates were sent deep into the western mountains to Chengdu, but there were limits to what could be crated and shipped. Just before the Japanese began their assault on Nanking, Emperor Hirohito sent his uncle, Prince Asaka Yasuhiko. Prince Asaka Yasuhiko to take over command from General Matsui Iwani, who was suffering from tuberculosis. In any aristocracy, there was always extreme nationalists and racists with a narrow education, and Japan was no exception. Men like Prince Asaka regarded themselves as demigods and felt only contempt for Chinese, Koreans, and other Asians. In addition, he was an alcoholic, given to wild bouts of drunken rage. On taking command outside Nanking, he told his aides that it was time to, quote, teach our Japanese brothers a lesson they will never forget, end quote. In the rape of Nanking that followed, Some 300,000 defenseless civilians were slain by Japanese troops. Between 20,000 and 80,000 women of all ages were raped repeatedly, including children, adolescent girls, and grandmothers, many of them disemboweled in the process. Oh my goodness. Ugh. I apologize to any people who has um, kids who are listening to this. Oh my goodness. Okay. Um, Men, women, and children were subjected to acts of such barbarism that the world recoiled in horror. Thousands of men were roped together and machine gunned or doused with gasoline and set afire. Others were used for bayonet practice or to practice beheading in a sporting competition to see which officer could behead the greatest number that day. Weeks passed while atrocities continued. Streets and alleys piled high with corpses. Unlike previous mass atrocities done out of sight, these were witnessed by hundreds of Westerners, including diplomats, doctors, and missionaries, some of whom smuggled out photographic evidence. Wow, we'll stop there for now. Boy, the Japanese um, culture as a whole will have a lot to um what is the word? We'll have a lot to answer for in the karmic world because the law of karma is the law of cause and effect. Whatever you put out will come back to you a thousand a thousandfold, at least 100-fold, right? You put out good stuff come back to you. You put out bad stuff come back to you. And that goes for culture as well. As a people as a culture, as a yeah, so the Japanese culture. And it goes the same with any any countries, whether it's America, whether it's, the superpowers, any of the superpowers. So just a side note there. It's called the law of karma. It will come back and bite them. Okay. All right, let's finish up the endnotes here. So the endnote about Japan and drugs in Manchukuo, you can find that in Wakeman Policing, page 272 to 275. The note about Chiang Kai-shek purchasing drugs from Japan's Manchurian cartel. See Marshall, Opium, and the Politics of Gangsterism in Nationalist China, 1927 to 1945. The note about contest for control of drug traffic between Chiang Kai-shek and the Japanese. This find that you can find that in Marshall, page 24. The note about imaginary insult, you can find that in Bix, Hirohito and the Making of Modern Japan, page 319 to 320. Note about finished up in 2 to 3 months, you can find that in Bix, Hirohito, page 320. Note about Japan, corrupt on the verge of revolution. You can find that in Seagrave, Song, page 363. The note about embargoes, Roosevelt's call for economic quarantine against the Japanese epidemic. Seagrave and Seagrave, the Yamato Dynasty, page 165. The note about Chang's preemptive strike, you can find that in Wasserman, Secret War, page 15. And then the note about Yasaka Yasuhiko. Later, one of Prince Asaka's aides claimed that he had issued this instruction himself, not the prince. But it is obvious that this was only an attempt to shield his master. Historically, aides to Japanese princes were not in the habit of preempting the authority of their masters. The U.S. occupation coerced many witnesses to take the fall for the Imperial Army. You could find that in Iris Chang, The Rape of Nanking. Also, Seagrave and Seagrave, The Yamato Dynasty, Chapter 9, The Exorcists. Wow, what a brutal world that is. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed that. I apologize for all the horrific um, descriptions. So, anyways, we will continue next time with the chapter, with the book. And boy, I hope I don't get nightmares from that. Okay, sorry about that. That really got me. That little description got me. Okay. We will see you next time in our next book club. And in the meantime, I hope you guys all have a great day, great afternoon, great evening, wherever you guys are. And all right, bye bye now.